Hey everyone, welcome to the Political Ideologies primer video. This is just to give you a brief overview of the topic so that as you're going through the content embedded in this module, you'll have a better idea of what you're grappling with. So first, let's define political ideologies. In the context of American politics, we're familiar with the differences between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. You're either a conservative or you're liberal. Those are political ideologies. A political ideology is simply a viewpoint, a perspective, a set of beliefs, opinions on government, how government should work, how it should run, what the relationship between government and its citizens should look like. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about political ideologies. Now, the reason we're going over this before the Constitution or the founding is I really want you to be able to evaluate our Constitution, evaluate our political institutions, and at the end of this class, be able to criticize those structures and documents and institutions. And in order for you guys to criticize all of this stuff, you need to have some perspective. You need to be introduced to different ways of doing things, right? But before we talk about the variety of political ideologies, I want you to just pause and think about just how universal government is. In other words, how much government is just entangled in our daily lives. So take a second, think to yourself, is there any aspect of my life that the government doesn't have any influence over? Maybe not necessarily control, but influence. You might be thinking, well, the government doesn't have any control or influence over whether or not I choose to take this class or choose to show up to school on a regular basis. Well, RCC is funded by taxpayer money. So in some ways, RCC is government funded. You might think, oh, my love life, my personal life, there's no way the government has a hand in that. Well, the government is the one that helps you symbolize whether or not you love somebody with a marriage certificate, right? And we could just go down this road for a very long time. The point that I'm trying to get across is that government is everywhere and it's in everything. And it's something that we kind of forget about. We take for granted. Okay, so that's why it's important for us to evaluate just how much power and control we want to give to government. So there are 4 questions that each political ideology has sort of a different answer to. These are the political ideologies that you are going to read about in this module. You'll see that there are 6 of them. They have different answers to the questions I've presented right here. The first question is just about human nature. Are we really good? Are we bad? Are we cooperative? Are we malicious, selfish, self-interested? The second question is about equality. So, for instance, conservatives think that people aren't necessarily born with the same, they're not born into the same circumstances as other people in this country, but it might not be the government's responsibility to mitigate or, in other words, improve those inequities, right? But for a liberal or for a socialist, it is the government's responsibility to make sure that everybody is living in the same set of conditions. In other words, everybody has the same standard of living. The third question that these political ideologies ask is, just how much influence and power should we give to the government? If you ask an anarchist, Their answer is going to be, well, we just shouldn't even have government. If you ask a socialist is going to say the government should actually control the economy, and all of the money that's made on a regular basis, that should be redistributed, equally redistributed to all of the citizens of a particular country. The last question is, what role does the government have in regulating the economy? Let me give you one example of a way in which the United States government right now regulates the economy. There, for instance, is a minimum wage in California. So if you work for a company or work for somebody, they are required to pay you a minimum amount per hour. I'm not really sure what minimum wage is right now. I think it's $12 an hour. It was only $7 an hour when I got my first job. But that's just an example of a way in which the government can have an influence or an impact over the economy. So let's talk about this means of production label that I put on this last question. Should the government own the means of production? The reason I want to really underline this term is it's important to understand this term in order to differentiate between communism, socialism, and even anarchism, maybe. Okay, so the means of production is just anything that makes you money. In the case of, let's say, an Uber driver, his or her car is their means of production. You have to have a car in order to make money as an Uber driver. This other example I have here up on the PowerPoint is Starbucks. So if you go to Starbucks, the product that they produce is coffee, amongst other things. Coffee is the main one. But in order to make that coffee, they need an espresso machine in every Starbucks. They need a refrigerator. They also need workers to work those means of production. Okay, so some of these ideologies think that the system that we have here in the United States, capitalism, where people own the means of production, that's not okay. That's not right. That's not morally acceptable. Instead, the workers themselves, the people that work at Starbucks and are actually using the means of production, should then own the means of production. For another political ideology, such as socialism, socialists believe that the state should own the means of production. When I say state, I mean government. The government should take control over all those espresso machines and coffee makers, and whatever money is made off of the coffee that gets produced should be reallocated to all of the citizens of a particular society. Okay, so these are just examples. This will help you better understand these differences between especially communism and socialism. Okay, so here's the political ideological scale. You guys are going to read about all 6 of these political ideologies in the module. Now, I'm going to forewarn you, this reading is thick. It's not easy, but do your best. You're going to absorb way more information than you think you will the first time around reading it. It might take 1 or 2 tries at reading these articles to really get what is being said. But notice how I have the scale in a particular order. Communism is at the very top of the scale, and anarchy is at the very bottom. Communists, socialists, liberals are going to be a little bit more okay with the government getting involved in our lives. That means more taxes, and that means more governmental services, or what we call social goods, such as public education, free healthcare, disability benefits, etc. On the bottom, we have conservatives, libertarians. Libertarians, for instance, think that we should have a government that is as minimalist as possible. So the government only exists to protect us from outside invaders and to also protect us from each other within our borders, protect us, prevent us from causing harm unto one another. But besides that, that's it. That's the only good reason to tax people, is to pay for the military and pay for the police. Education, healthcare, retirement, things of that sort, that's left up to the individual. And that therefore means that the government is not getting super heavily involved in your life. Okay, so just do your best as you're reading through these various different articles, and let me know if you guys have any questions. You can post those questions to the Ask Me Anything discussion thread.